Well, hello, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
All right, a little tired with the change of time, but I'll make it. How about you?
So thankfully, we actually last night got to ditch the kids at the grandparents' house for the first time in a long time. But they're both vaccinated now, so I'm doing all I want.
Nice.
So we got to sleep. I got lots of sleep, way more sleep than I've had in a long time.
Are you thinking how sad is it? The kids go away and all you want to do is sleep?
Oh no, I have no trouble with that at all. I have no issue with my lack of productivity when they're not around.
That is good. That is
Right?
very good.
No, it was really nice. It's really nice.
I just realized that I never sent out a reminder email to the group like I normally do last night.
Oh yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I didn't send one. I'm like, well,
what are you gonna do?
I mean, they get reminders from lots of places. It shouldn't have to come just from me.
No, definitely not.
Oh gosh.
This is doing something kind of weird. All right. So this is, we're gonna get deep into God's workshop / craft room today.
And Zanny's joining you, right?
I don't think Zanny's coming.
Oh no.
Nope, she doesn't need to come.
Okay, I thought she was coming. So
she's in Florida. She she just took off. I think she's okay, but
I have the itch. I keep looking at websites at Arizona.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, if I wait till May, Phoenix is way too hot.
Right. I see, and there's definitely there's definitely some itchy folk out there right now trying to think through what's the safest, what's the best, what's the warmest without too warm.
Hey, I keep forgetting to ask. I have tried to contact Trudy a few times. I haven't in a while, but
okay.
Do you know anything about?
Not anything probably that you don't know. I think
I mean, I know she was self-employed, and I just didn't know if she's initially. I checked in with her, and she said her clients were really good about still calling her and stuff. But like I think I had
that's the only thing I've heard too.
Or texted, and it's like I hadn't heard anything, haven't seen her anywhere on like any of the Zoom stuff, and I just didn't know if she'd left us.
I really hope not. That's not my understanding.
Okay.
But
I need to try to reach out again.
I know folks. I haven't personally been in contact with her recently, but I know folks have.
Okay.
So
okay, good. Well, I was just, I knew that she was, she's had a lot of challenges, and she is just such an impressive person that way. But I was, concerned about her well-being. And then I know that she and her son sometimes had some challenges with, her son did, as far as where to a feeling of belonging places. And so I just was hoping that things were okay. I thought, well, maybe you knew.
Nope, I don't have any other intel, unfortunately. I know that she's been like, still there've been different congregation members who she's been working for and working with, but that's kind of it.
Okay. All right.
I know. I think that's going to be a big question too, is, how to keep track of people that for one reason or another, kind of have gotten lost in the shuffle of this time too, of this last year. And I think we've tried to do a good job of not letting folks fall through the cracks, but there's always, there's always challenges to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I just good
Please, yeah,
as far as what you've told me, and I just need to do better.
Well, I think, yeah, it's, yeah. Let's see here.
Ooh.
I know, we're gonna get it
Well, I
going.
hope it's more than you and me, although this could be fun, but
We got Dr. Bob in the house. Ron Hagen's here.
okay.
Good morning.
Are you seeing those folks, Penny?
I am.
Okay.
I am now.
Good morning.
I didn't see them come in, but I do
Okay.
see them now. So that's good. So Bob, I am really hoping that by fall, we are going to finally get to hear your Paul piece.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Oh, well,
And-
thank you. Thank you for your understanding.
Oh, I totally understand. Totally.
Yeah.
That you don't want to do it like this. I totally get that. But I'm trying to rethink this whole Acts thing because it ties in so well with Paul too. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should do something different. I don't know, because I'm limited in weeks and I just don't know.
Well, thank you for all that you do. My goodness. It's really quite something.
Well,
for all of you.
Pastor Peter is a fun person to work with.
I
So
can believe that.
so I have a good time. I'm hoping he does.
I do.
You know?
It's definitely mutual. It's definitely mutual.
So yeah, so it's good. It's good. It keeps me honest.
Does it?
I'll sort of. Let's put it this way. It keeps me growing. There we go. It
There
keeps
you
me
go.
growing, even if I'm thinking, oh, I just don't think I can do anymore, grow anymore. And then it's like, oh, you can do this. Just good morning, Carol.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Is Bill there too?
Well, I'm going to give it to Bill, but I can't find the thing. I don't see anybody. Oh, I see Bob.
Yeah, I can stop this for a second and then we can.
There we
Oh,
go.
wow. Okay.
better?
That was magic.
I've just, there's there's always little quirks to this stuff.
Okay, I'm going to give this to the big quirk in our family.
He's one of my favorite quirks right there.
Hi, all you little quirks out there.
Oh, we're as quirky as ever. How about you?
Yeah. Are you guys just getting warmed up or what?
That's
Just getting
right.
warmed up.
Settled in.
Well, I'm just reading about John Lennon
Ooh.
and I gotta get me out of it, will you?
You're not, you want a different distraction?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, good.
Okay.
We've got plenty of other potential distractions for you today.
Good. I'm not aware of any right now, so I'm open.
Open to the spirit.
Yep.
That's right. Hi, Emily. Good morning, Kay. Good morning, Jerry.
Morning.
Emily. Hi.
And Ron in Arizona, every time I see something on Facebook that you guys are doing, I'm like, I need to go see what's the temperature where in Arizona in May that I could tolerate.
Hey, we got a good temperature today.
We
It's not too
do.
bad.
We do. I'm having it after being home for a year. I've got a little bit of an itch to go somewhere.
Okay, we got a nice prairie out behind our house.
Okay. Okay. Let me think about that. That could be good. That could be good. I like prairies.
Could help
Yeah.
nourish.
It was really fun. I actually repotted some house plants yesterday and I took them out into the garage on the workbench and oh, it felt so good to be playing in the dirt again.
Mm.
And then I walked out to our garden and we have spinach that overwintered.
No way.
Yes, I
Coming
have
up.
three spinach plants that overwintered that
awesome.
have new little leaves on them.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like, I know,
Oh, yippee.
Stuff is hardy.
it
it's
is
hardy.
very hardy. So that was kind of fun. It was like, oh my gosh, life.
Yeah, that's like a little. That's like the shoot of Jesse, the shoot of spinach.
There we
coming up.
go.
How about maple? I don't know anybody who has tapped maple trees before.
What? You don't
Jerry's
know
just,
anybody?
Jerry's just
But
started
it's
this year.
now.
Jerry's
Oh.
Jerry's first time. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Oh.
How much have you got, Jerry?
Probably about close to half a gallon, but it's not completely finished.
Oh, my goodness.
But I got
That's
more
awesome.
cooking now and I still
Yeah.
tapping.
Nice.
I'd love to see how you do that.
Yeah, we have a maple, so someone can come and tap it.
See?
Get around.
We just have a few trees in the yard that he's doing,
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
Oh.
It doesn't take many. It doesn't take much.
How
Nope,
old do they have to be before they produce?
they say 11-inch diameter.
11, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Our neighbor's
more-
a major maple syrup guy. He gathers 70 gallons at a time from his trees up north, so.
Wow.
Oh,
goodness. Wow.
I love real maple syrup. Oh my gosh.
Can't beat it.
My mom had cousins who owned a farm and they had we called it a sugar bush by where we were
Sugar
because they
bush.
had, gosh, I don't know, at least 50 trees or more
Yeah.
that they could tap. And they had the great big pans out in the woods that they cooked
Boy,
it
what-
with the wood fire. And my mom
Yeah.
talks about they used to do that when she was a kid too. So it brings back
Such an-
warm fuzzies.
And it's an all ages, it really is an all ages thing. That's kind of the
Yep.
other cool part about it is it can
Sounds
be.
like
and
your
it's-
whole neighborhood.
Yeah, quite a few folks, quite a few. Yeah.
Did you
Yeah,
learn
we-
from them? Or had you done it
I
before?
mostly learned so I actually got the most of the equipment that I have from my aunt who lives in Michigan, and we had just been out there to visit one time, and she had some extra, just wasn't using it and said you could take it. So so that's kind of how we got started. And then my brother has done quite a bit of, they've got kind of a whole trail system of tubing that, it goes downhill and makes it,
Yeah.
gets it into a big storage tank at the very end. So it's, that's where it gets really sophisticated
Yeah.
and people get real creative with it. But yeah, I'm really just a hack too, Jerry. And it's just been just a cool joy.
Yep, it
I've
is.
thought now, I really do enjoy it though. And we've been reading some books. Actually, Alan Page, State Justice Alan Page, former
Yeah.
Viking, wrote a book called what is it, Maple Sugaring or something like that.
Really?
He talks about his experience growing up and doing maple syrup, and then the story is about how he shares it with his granddaughter
Yep.
as well. So yeah, it's a really cool time of year. And
That's just one of those fun things too that kids will remember.
forever. Yeah.
It'll be one of their stories they share when they're
Yeah.
older. You know, it's just one of those fun, unique activities they get to do with mom and dad. And those are always so special, you know,
Yeah.
just,
Yep.
yeah, really fun. Norma,
And it's
I loved your children's message today. Oh my goodness.
how
It was
deep,
how
how
deep,
wide,
how long.
how
it
long,
was-
how vast is God's love.
Yeah, thank you. It's all true. And
I
I
know.
came back just to do this morning. I'm so glad to be with you at the adult forum.
Woo! You just made it right in time. You
Yeah.
just flew in.
Yeah.
Well, should we get started? What do you think?
You're in charge today. I'm just here for the ride.
Well, and I think Norma's was a good example of this. The Maple is a good example of this too. Their story, you know, those experiences and those stories can be, you know, really powerful, really special, and they're God moments. And I think that's kind of where we're going to tie together our stories and God's stories today. Well, do you want to do just a quick kind of overview of what we have planned next and that kind of thing, Penny? And then we
Well,
can
I saw that next week we're doing something, and my name was listed as having some responsibility, and I don't know what I'm doing. So something with
course.
you.
we're gonna we're gonna continue this series, and
Yes.
next week we'll have so today is really the workshop part of it, and then next week will be a little bit more of kind of the sharing and a little bit more of hopefully kind of where folks have both seen God, where we experience God in our own stories. And I think you shared one in the Trinity today that we could lift up, Penny, and Emily Carlsrud is going to share one as well next week. And we'll have maybe some other folks who are bold enough to do that. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
It's not as scary as you might think. And once you start doing it, it becomes easier.
Well, and I think that's kind of what we'll get into too today is that, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
We think so.
Unvarnished.
Unvarnished God Stories, Play-Doh, prompts, and pens with Pastor Peter. You could talk about all the alliteration, but that's so we're gonna get into the ways in which, and I think there are a variety of creative ways to do this, and thinking through our unvarnished God stories. Not perfect, not all, doesn't have to be pretty, but can be just a messy blessing and a wrestling of how God has been at work in our lives. So this is kind of the main point of today. And that's really that each of us has a God story, that each of us has a sacred, unique, God-infused part of our lives that makes a difference in the world. And they're really just these places where our lives intersect. And that might be our gifts, that might be our work, that might be our meaning, that might be our relationships, that might be the way that we grew up, the way that we have been parented, the way that we parent, but all the different ways that our stories and God's stories intersect. And today, what I really want to do is allow some time for God's workshop, your own dwelling in God's workshop, God's craft room, God's creative space, and listening deeply to the way that the Spirit is working in your experience, has worked in your experience, kind of some of those signposts or mile markers in your journey that have been significant in the ways that have formed your faith. So that's what we're going to do today. But the first thing is we're going to kind of get a little bit creative. And this is one of my favorite things to do, kind of using different parts of our brain that sometimes, for me at least, it really is helpful to kind of get out of my head a little bit and into my hands and my body, and thinking through the ways in which God has been active or present in creative elements. So there's a little bit of participation here for you, okay? And here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 3 minutes, and it looks like to grab some stuff, okay? I've got like I've got a bunch of these little bins in my office of like creative knickknacks, but you might have a junk drawer or something, maybe like from your desk. You could grab markers, pens, paper, but I want you to go grab that really quick, okay? So you gotta you gotta get up and go grab something out of the junk drawer. And the end game of this is to think about a time, to think about a moment, think about a story when you've sensed God's presence in your life. Doesn't have to be dramatic, doesn't have to be or end happily, doesn't have to be perfect. But Ron, I want you to go get some stuff, or if you've got some stuff in your drawer, just some knickknacks, some tapes. You could get duct tape, anything that might be useful for this, and maybe some pens and our markers and paper too. And we'll just take a couple minutes to do that. To get your stuff. Grab some stuff. God uses stuff. Some creative stuff. Whatever you've got. Maybe some little toys. And we're going to use your imagination a little bit here. Are y'all ready, Nelsons, for Destination Imagination? Norma, you're ready? Pat and John, you're ready? Amy, where's Amy? Where did Amy Schoenborn go? She's probably got some pretty nice, some cool bins. I know Joanne has. You've got some creative bins, Joanne. Okay. And I really like what Pastor Chris said this morning about about being a community of practice, a community that experiments, a community that tries things, that's willing to step out and kind of get outside your comfort zone just a little bit. Bill, are you ready? We're still waiting on a couple folks to come back. Amy's back. You got some cool stuff. All right. So one of the things that I kind of think about in this exercise is kind of like a map. Like, what are the different moments? What are the different stories kind of along the map of my life, and the way that God has been a part of that. Like for me, I know that some of the thinnest places that I've had with God have been in nature. I know that to be true. I see it in the maples, right? Like I see God's presence and God speaking to me through the wonders of God's creation. So this is a little pine cone. That's one way to think about that. I also I got this little beaded necklace, and I love to make things. I love to create. I think we are gifted. I just I think about the things that that come from people's hands, that have come from my hands, that I've made, gifts that I've given to people, things that I've helped co-create with my own imagination. So I thought about that, and that's one of my favorite things to do with my kids is to create, and I connect with God through creating, through making things. What else? Share a moment or a time that you've sensed God's presence. When has that been for you? What do you have that you picked up that is an example of that? Joanne, I can't hear you. Oh, but it's a really cool scissors. Are we not hearing her?
Now,
Oh, there we go.
Pastor Peter, can we go off your share screen for a minute?
Oh, yeah. Great. Yep.
All right, perfect.
That'll be easier.
I do have trouble with my microphone. Can you hear me?
I can hear. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. I was saying I have got in my drawer this beautiful pair of child's scissors. I actually had two. I have two pair, but my youngest grandchild now is 14. So this is a memory. You're going through it, Pastor Pete, but it's a beautiful memory of gathering with that imaginative brain of little children. And they could kind of work with the scissors, and then they got old enough they could manage the scissors. And then we got to the point where, I could teach them how to knit. They love to knit. And we painted everything from cookies to things on paper. And that is an expression of freedom of what the colors they used or didn't use, the brushes they wanted to use. Amazing. I've got a whole file of paintings that they did from day one on that I will show them as their graduation, maybe. I don't know. And this is a bowl of pretzels, and this morning I was Googling seasoned oyster crackers and seasoned pretzels because my neighbor across the street has young grandchildren, and I told her about the oyster crackers, and she said, "Oh, I think they would love to do that. So can I have the recipe?" So we share that too. I'm done.
And just say a little bit, Joanne, too, about how you see God in that kind of in that creativity, or passing on some of those things too that you love.
Well, I guess I just will answer with, how can't you not see God?
Well said. Nice. Others? What did you grab? What kind of stuff?
Well, I made something quick.
You did?
Yeah.
You made a
Let's
hat.
see.
Oh, an elephant.
Aw,
No, it's not an elephant.
card.
No, this is a tent.
Oh,
And this is me and David, and there's the tree. And we went camping and scouting.
Nice.
And it was a memory I had totally forgotten about. until we started gathering stuff, and it was,
Hmm.
we were scouting, and I was the scout leader, but I was also, the mom.
Yeah.
And we were lying in the tent that night. And he said, "This is the best thing ever, Mom."
Mm.
And I hadn't ever thought of it until now, that I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a God connection.
Yeah.
So that's my tent, my tree, and my
Aw.
people.
Aw. And that God works through those relationships and those special moments.
Yeah. And it just never occurred
Love
to
it.
me that,
Love it.
so there you go.
That's great. What else? What else came to mind for folks?
Well,
got a
I
couple
will never be like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, I happened to pick up, this is my dog's favorite toy. It's a tiny tire.
Nice.
And we put peanut butter in it and he licks it out of the
Aw.
inside rim. And I just think about the way that he came into our lives. We were like, maybe someday we'll get a dog, but not today.
Yeah.
And we just happened to be looking, and we just fell in love with his description and his pictures. And he's been so, so great. Like, no problems. He's adjusted so well.
Yeah.
I just think God meant for him to be in our lives.
That's cool.
So, and then I also picked up, I have a notebook because I tend to collect these empty notebooks. Because I just like to
Those are
sometimes just
beautiful.
doodle. Yeah, these are, like the $2 at Walmart, I think.
Yeah.
I'll grab those every now and again. And then a big bag of highlighters.
Yeah.
I have a lot. And that's a way that I can get out of my head and just look at the colors and, see God in all of that.
Mm-hmm. And just kind of let your heart and mind be free and to create. I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Cool. What's your dog's name again, Emily?
Kojo.
Kojo.
Yeah, he's a little 7-pound pomchi. So.
Yeah. And a
He's a tiny
pandemic
tire.
and a pandemic pup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And how those pets become really part of our families and part of our story with God and with each other. That's good.
Norma, you had something.
Yes, just a comment for Emily. I used to have a horse named Kojo. Her name was Kojo Lisa, and I loved her. I will never be like Joanne Brown. I'd like to be.
Because you're Norma. You're not Joanne. You're Norma.
I know it. But I have markers, and I tried with a pencil to draw a card. I couldn't do it. I picked up Playdough that I got from a workshop with Zanny, and that didn't work. So I couldn't. I don't have an artistic side, so I went to the cupboard, and I got this car. It's a race car from our grandkids. But a God story that stays with me is when I used to work in Woodbury, and at the last 15 years, I was a school librarian in an elementary school. And I would drive to school and often pretend that Jesus was sitting in the car seat next to me and kind of go through the day or just talk. And sometimes I just needed an inspiration. And then when I got to school, I could stand in the library just by myself. I always got there early and say, God bless this room. God bless me and my work in this space. And I honestly, sometimes an idea or a thought would just come into my mind, and I would say, oh, thank you, God, for that. I mean, it just felt real to me that something would just go in there. And anyway, so I guess I can't get out of my body.
No, that's perfect. I think that commuting time too, I know it's been a great time for me to pray as well, on my way to and from Stillwater. But I've heard that from lots of that was actually what we did this prayer milestone. And that's like what most of the parents said was the best time for them to pray was when they're driving. And really being able to kind of have that, have that Jesus passenger to reflect back. That's great. Thank you.
Anyone else have something they
Yeah,
want to
there-
share?
Well, John and I are neither Joanne nor are we Norma.
Never expected you to be.
Yeah, we just don't come from that side of the world either. We had 6 grandkids and 5 were boys. So this is what we grew up with.
Yeah.
We've got tons of those. We still have little people and tons of Legos that when they come and the oldest is now 18 and the youngest is 11, 12, they still play. That's what they drag out, all the
Yeah.
baby toys. And it's just a fun God moment for us to see them all
Mhm.
come and get all excited and build all the Lego things.
That's
But for John and I think the God moments are we live in the country. It's the birds. We just
Yeah.
constantly, we have a lot of feeders. And, this morning we watched a hawk come in.
Oh,
and,
nice.
so it's kind of cool. That's our God thing, is living out here and watching night wildlife, being outside.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
I grew up as a farm boy, so I
Mhm.
identify with this very much, except that we had farmals, not John Deere,
Not John Deere. Yeah.
The red one.
the red one.
Yeah.
Up at 6 o'clock in the morning and milking cows and
Don't say it.
other things that I won't say. We did
Shoveling something?
Pardon me?
Shoveling.
Shoveling something?
There's some shoveling.
And then
That's faithful work.
we didn't change our shoes, we changed our clothes, and then walked to a one-room
Oh,
schoolhouse.
that's enough.
And then started. Those are God moments, but those are memories at least.
Well, and I think those are, I think it's really up to us to connect the dots, right? I mean, I think that's a big part of it is, I think God's going to be there. God's going to be on the farm here, no matter what. It's the way that we make sense of the way that God is a part of that, that care of animals, of feeding people, of being an agent in that. Yeah. Good. Other thoughts? Well, thanks for your willingness just to get a little bit using kind of multiple intelligences, different ways that we can kind of engage this stuff. And for me, that's a fun part of engaging God's story and our story together. And really, that's an example that there's really no one way to explore and share the ways that God has been a part of our lives. It is this embodied journey with God that stitches together our minds, our hearts, our lives, our relationships. There's this old saying that's the longest journey that we will ever make is, from our head to our heart. And I think the biblical witness, the way that we interact together as the body of Christ continues to kind of make this journey from our head to our heart. And I think that goes on for forever. I don't know if we ever stop doing that, making that trek from our head to our heart. And I think that's the invitation that we have with God. And just the variety of ways that we're gifted, that we have these incredible brains, that we have these incredible big hearts, and that we're called to really wrestle with it. Anybody have any idea what this image represents, or this?
You need to share your screen again.
See, this is
why you have me.
That's right. Sorry. This is okay. That was a really nice slide. I wanted you to see that. Again, this is just that stitching together of our minds and hearts. Do you think it's the longest journey? That was kind of a question. What do you think? What do you think about that? From your head to your heart? What do you think about that?
A
Is that
lot of
true?
times
What about the hardest journey?
Or the hardest journey? Yeah, Jerry. Yeah. Yeah. What is hard? What do you kind of, yeah, what's challenging?
It's hard sometimes to use your heart making decisions instead of your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. What else? What do you have to engage in your heart that your brain might not be using?
What would Jesus do?
Yeah. 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 And what would that be?
Treat with love, treat people with love.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Nice.
I have a hard time getting out of my head.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think some of it has to do with the whole idea of this idea that, well, you need to think things through, you know, sort out all the facts, be logical. You know, this was, I grew up in a family with engineers, you know, make
God
your
bless
list,
God
you know,
bless them.
cross
Yep.
your T's, dot your
Yep.
I's. And so I can get immobilized in my head.
Sure.
And so that's always a lot of work for me to get through that knot.
My family sometimes calls that paralysis by overanalysis. Ron, I think you were saying something too, Mr. Engineer. Oh,
we don't hear
have your
you.
Bluetooth. Where's your headset at? No,
No,
you're still not coming in. Yeah. Let me try one more. Nope. Sorry. Try again. Nope. Ah, sorry.
you want to type it in the chat?
Yeah, and we can go, and we can come back to you too.
Yeah.
I think this is just one of those really human parts though of our journey is this, you know, and I think sometimes it's reverse for some people too. Sometimes it's going from the heart to the head and making that journey too. But I think that the interconnectedness of those, of using all that God has given to us to discern how God is at work in our lives. Okay, so now, can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. What do you see? What is that, or what is that? It's a biblical story. I'll give you that much. Any ideas?
Well, it looks like struggle to me, but I'm not sure that I know which struggle it is.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yep. Delzy?
Is it Jacob's struggling with God?
Yeah. Yeah. Good job. Is that what you're going to say too, Sharon?
No, I was thinking I was seeing waves in the background and I was thinking it was Jesus picking Peter out of the water.
That's that's really good though. I like that too. I really like that too. Good. Yeah. And I think, you know, Kay, you're right that there's plenty of struggle in the Bible. And there are plenty of examples of this, but this is the story of Jacob wrestling with God. And it's in Genesis 32. And I just wanted to read this short piece to you really quick. The same night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had with him. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask me my name?" And then there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. So one of the things, and Pat, you mentioned this too, about I grew up with 3 older brothers, and one of the ways that we processed our emotion growing up was by wrestling. And so this image for me of Jacob wrestling God has always been really a poignant one for me in my story of wrestling, of striving with God, of asking questions, of wondering how God is active in my life. And I think it's a good one for all of us as we kind of wrestle and wonder about the ways that we, through our ups and downs, through our joys and sorrows, through our hills and valleys, how God continues to bless us, how we are, how there is blessing in the wrestling, and how God invites us into that blessing in the wrestling. And I think it's a good story to kind of help to shape our own narratives of wondering, of curiosity, of imagination, and stitching together our minds and hearts. Any other comments about that story that kind of stuck out for you, that were interesting?
We think of Elijah seeing God and Moses being in contact with God. And I don't think we think about this story as much of that direct contact. We see, and what I'm curious about is we see Moses and Elijah appearing with Jesus in the Transfiguration, but we didn't see Israel or Jacob.
Yeah, where's Israel? Yeah, good question. That's really good.
Well, it isn't a burning question, but it just occurs to me.
Yeah. And Abraham wasn't there either.
Right.
Yeah. And yet kind of his story keeps coming back, particularly in Paul and some of his writing too. That's good. And that naming piece too, I think, how do we kind of take on different names in different seasons of life? I think there's a lot of embodiment in that. A lot of the personality of Jacob comes across in that story too. Jacob is a twin. He's really a trickster. He's not the one who should have got the blessing from God, and yet God still chooses to bless him. And there's kind of something about that shifting expectation of what was supposed to be versus what is, that I think comes through in that story too, that I really like. I'm also the youngest, so I always like that theme of youngest children being blessed. David, Joseph, Jacob, I could go on, but it's just a shout out to those younger siblings out there. Esau does pretty well in life too, so there's that.
So do we not necessarily see God in the wrestling because we have judgment in where we're supposed to see God?
What do you think?
I think I do. I think that
Mhm.
there can be a real expectation that only
Yeah.
when there's this good feeling or something positive that I see God. But I hadn't thought about it quite like the blessing and the wrestling.
Mhm.
I don't think I let myself go there, and I should. Just a thought.
No, I think in those moments of struggling, maybe we sense God the most. I
Yeah.
think of the story of Jonah
Mhm.
um, and the fussing that he went through, and it was certainly not an absence of thinking about God. He
No.
continued to struggle all along with that. And I think indifference sometimes is when we are furthest from
Yeah.
God. And
Hmm.
it's interesting to talk to people who have, for one reason or another, walked away from their faith temporarily, and then will tell about their story. And inevitably, that story has something to do with, all at once, I began to think of God, and I struggled with my faith, and eventually began to work through it. But it was really the struggle that became the most important.
Yeah, I think this really is the challenge of the kind of the perfect God story, or the one that only ends in happy, only ends happily, or that everything happens for a reason kind of piece. I think the story of Jacob really somewhat challenges that vision. And that it's an unvarnished story. I think it's a very messy piece. He still walks away limping. That he's going to be changed forever for this, physically changed forever.
So not to get too far off, but I do see Ron's statement in the picture.
Sure.
Is the right or the left brain connected to the heart? Was his question.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the neuroscience? I think brain imaging is coming a long way, Ron. We're gonna figure that out pretty soon, but
It could be like music where both sides are being used.
I think it's
Yeah.
That's a cop out.
I'm going with it. I'm sticking to it.
I believe it. I believe it. I agree.
Well, I think there's and this really came out of some of the vision that Pastor Chris really lifted up last week too. And the question about what are the other ways, what are some of the other examples of unvarnished God stories in Scripture? I think Jonah is one of the best. Jacob is a great one. The story of Joseph's brothers as well is a really good one. Paul's story, and I'm really looking forward to Dr. Bob's take on that one when we can. But I think Paul's story is another really unvarnished God story of really being transformed from a life of judgment and violence into one of grace. It's not pretty. These are not just kind of easy stories to stomach. And I think the Psalms are a really invitational prompting. Some people will say that there's no emotion under heaven that isn't seen in the Psalms, of
Right.
lament and grief, of sadness, of joy, of this mixture of so much of our wrestling in our hearts and our minds that the Psalms invite us into. And really this steady current that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit, that there's hope even in the struggle. And I think that reminder is a really important prompt for us as we wonder about the way that God is involved in our God story, or our stories and God's stories intersect. What a great treasure trove of resources and words that can help our words find their kind of true meaning.
You know, the earliest struggle within the Christian church was the question of for whom is this message intended?
Yeah.
And I love the story of Peter and Cornelius.
Yeah.
Where
Yes.
Peter struggles with this imagery of what is proper to eat and this vision that he has. All of which then eventually prompts him to go to Cornelius's house, a Gentile.
Right.
And you can imagine a little bit as he was walking to Cornelius's house, he was thinking of this imagery, but on the other hand, he was maybe thinking, I don't know that I ought to be doing this. I guess I got this vision that tells me I maybe should, but is this message really for the non-Jewish person? And maybe with some hope that, well, I'll go and I'll see Cornelius and they won't welcome me and then I can leave and I won't have this guilt feeling. But he goes in and tells the story, and lo and behold, the whole family believes him. So now what am I going to do? You know? But it was that struggle of the message being for everyone, not just
and bigger than he had imagined. And
yes.
and again, kind of going back to that, shifting our expectations beyond that which we first kind of might expect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that God truly shows no partiality.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. Peter is another one, you know, where this, you know, where Peter is someone who nobody would look up to. And
Yes.
he is the one by which the church is built, and that just the unlikeliness, the unusualness of the people who are brought into this story. So I just wanted to, so now it's this is for all the more literal and written thinkers among us. I've got kind of three main kind of prompting themes. One is kind of, and I think these are really good, and I'll send these slides so that you can have them later as well, because we're just not going to have enough time to finish up here, but just taking a couple of minutes on each one. I think it's really important, especially as Lutherans, to think about the ways in which we have been drawn into the faith, and who drew us into the faith. I think the biblical witness really does point to this generational. It's like a lot of what Joanne was talking about, and a lot of what you mentioned too with grandkids and kids, and the ways in which we kind of pass on the things that are important to us, to our kids, to generations to come. And thinking through that journey, that map in our minds about the way that we were first drawn into the faith. And I think for Lutherans, really coming at that from a place of grace, really coming at that from a place of dependence, really coming at that from a place of being welcomed when we didn't have any skills or abilities, or not much of a story to tell other than that which has been given to us. I think that's a really important piece to kind of go back to. So to think about that a little bit, to wonder about the people who have made the biggest influence in your life, who have been mentors to you, who have been those folks that have showered blessing on you, that you've maybe had wrestling with, but have somehow taught you something bigger about the world, bigger about God. And then this, I think, really, I think from a very early age, we have a sense, this is really the mind-heart connection too again, and the embodied experience of faith, but we can kind of dial back to some of those moments when we felt closest to God. And taking some time on that to really dwell with our own memories in that, memories maybe out on the farm, memories maybe out on the lake, when we've had these significant interactions with God. Sometimes I think they're moments of struggle. I know one of the moments that I often come back to is a rainy day in spring when we buried my grandpa, and being out at the cemetery with my whole family gathered around to celebrate and give thanks for the life of our patriarch in our family. And just like, I felt at that time that God was weeping, that God was crying with us in the rain out in the cemetery. And I know that to be and all of us, I think, kind of can dial into some of those thin spaces. That's like what the Celtics will say, those thin spaces with God. And I think that keeps going. Where and what are you doing when you experience God's presence most? When you feel kind of in touch with the divine, or when you're really tapping into that question of what would Jesus do in this situation? Or when you've made those critical moments, those critical decisions around that, when you've connected your mind and heart. Some good stuff, good places to dwell for a bit. Okay. And this, all of this kind of dovetails, but I think another really important, and this, we've kind of touched on this too, but this sacred vulnerability, I think we're getting some different ways of thinking about the world. I think vulnerability, and particularly vulnerability for men has been seen as weakness. And I think our faith really is challenging that right now in a way that, and the wider culture is challenging that. Brene Brown's work around this, around vulnerability, I think is really important for us to listen to, lest we kind of, we armor ourselves up so much that we miss the power of God in our lives. We armor ourselves up so much that we miss the presence of God in our lives. I think that's true for both, for both men and women and our siblings. But what are some of the questions or doubts that I've wrestled with that have really challenged my faith? What struggles have stretched my heart? Maybe like Peter in the story of Cornelius, beyond that which I thought was the expected way to see God. What experiences have deepened my faith? When has my faith been truly tested? I think grief and loss is often a big place where that shows up. When our hearts are stretched, when we feel really lost or in the wilderness. I think this past year could sum that up quite a bit. I know I feel like we've been tested as a community beyond what I thought was possible in this last year, and really been asking some tough questions about what the health of our neighbors and the health of our community really is, really means to us. I think that's stuff that Pastor Chris talked about last week too, about the work that we're called to around racial equity and racial justice right now too. Really being challenged to be stretched, to think broadly about the ways that our systems have made some humans feel less than other humans, and not seen as the beloved children of God that we all are. And I really like this question too. What have I learned about my faith as I've lived my faith? What have I learned about my faith as I've lived my faith. Not just the faith that, was kind of passed on to me, but how we take the faith and continue to co-create that with God in our own experience, in our own bones, as well. Anything come to mind are these good? Are they kind of stirring some things? Good.
Yes.
We'll keep going. And then next week we'll have some more time too to kind of dig into this. And then I think this is the other piece that as Lutherans we really do focus on is the ways in which we're called to both love God and love the stories and the ways that God is active in our lives, and also listen for the ways that God is active in others' lives. Listen to the ways that God is moving and active in my neighbor's experience as well. To be open to that kind of intersection, to love our neighbors because God is active in a variety of ways throughout our collective experience. So how has God uniquely gifted me in my relationships, my work, my meaning, and my service to others? How do I use my gifts in collaboration, in partnership, in companionship with the other gifts in the body of Christ? How do we move together? When how does the eye and the ear and the heart and the lungs all move together in this body of Christ that we cultivate? And then kind of moving into this question of like, how has being a Christian changed my life? And why does it matter that I share that with others? That's kind of the Joanne thing too of how can't I share what God has been doing in my life and in the life of our community?
I think sometimes in that last piece where we talk about, why should I share it? Again, thinking about that idea of how you share it can be very broad.
Yeah. Yep.
Not just I'm gonna, tell you something.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to share the story, and too often I think we only go to the narrative.
And we limit it. Yep.
And we limit it, our experiences in our own God moments and stories aren't only one way. So why should the way we tell the story or share the story be just in one form?
Yeah. Good.
One theologian that read many, many years ago, I was probably in my 30s, we were studying about Christian witnessing, and his statement was, witness at all times, and if necessary, use words. You've probably heard that.
Yeah, no, that's really good though. And I think that's I feel like that's a little bit of the same take on the St. Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. Yeah, that's really good. And I think there are seasons and times of life and times of I think in our culture where words are really important, and verbal, where our verbal communication is really important too. But I think, Penny, the point too, just that there are so many ways that we do that, that we share what God is up to.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just going to say presence is a big deal.
Yeah.
Just presence. Sometimes no words, just being there with somebody.
That's often my biggest struggle with kind of blanket evangelism too, is that evangelism always requires a relationship. If there's no relationship, there's no way that you're going to be really able to sense the true depth of why Christ matters, and why it means so much to us. Why it means,
earning the right to speak.
Yeah, Yeah. And the curiosity to be, I think often the other piece of that is that we often are the ones being evangelized when we don't know it. It's reciprocal. It's never just a one-way thing.
Right.
It's always reciprocal. Yeah.
Pastor Peter, I just love all these questions.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, we've talked about grandchildren, but I have 5 between 15 and 19. And I think this last year has caused so many questions.
Yeah.
And one of my 16-year-olds asked about, actually it was, or do you have a God story? And all 5 of these kids are being raised in very faithful Christian homes. But I think these are good questions to ask with teens too, who are struggling with, I mean, they have struggles. And I mean, it might be a thought even for confirmation.
I agree.
It's just really, they're just wonderful questions.
Yeah, I think, and that's, we're really trying, and we did put together a little booklet with all of those questions in there. And I've got a ton of them. But I think these are really important pieces that I think are for all ages. They really can be for all ages.
Right.
And where people can really kind of dig in this stuff together and have a great like this, having a really rich conversation together. I love it. That's good. Thank you.
Peter,
Go ahead, Bob.
Your comment about relationships. Within the history of the Methodist Church, there was a time when people within the congregation were encouraged to provide some kind of a testimony, where they would share their statement of faith. I think as the church became more mainstream and some would say more sophisticated, such emotional things sort of got passed by.
Sure.
But I remember how meaningful those were, because they were people you knew. Speaking of relationships, these were people you knew.
Yeah.
And when they got up in front of people and expressed what their faith meant to them and how they got to the point they did in their journey of faith, it was tremendously powerful. And in our efforts to evangelize, I think we often ignore the possibility of the blessing that can come from that kind of expression.
Yeah, that's good.
But you've done that during the stewardship,
right? Actually the Lenten series, this we wish to see Jesus, having different people share that their experience of Jesus, has kind of been trying to get after that a little bit too. It's good.
Well, there have been times, at least while we've been at Trinity in the last 3 years, that we've seen that demonstrated several times, during stewardship, but also in other opportunities. I think they're just tremendously powerful.
Yeah, I do too. Yep.
Yeah, if you haven't had a chance to come on Wednesday night, it really is it's a fun format.
Yeah.
I think where you get to see everyone on Zoom, and then you get to, talk to each other for a little bit, which has been fun.
Yeah.
So if you haven't had a chance, give it a try.
And they're all recorded as well, so you can kind of go back and take a peek. But good plug, Penny.
Well, Pastor Peter, it's 6:12.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I appreciate it.
Yes, and Ron mentions here, happy Pie Day to everyone. Everyone should be eating pie at 3:14 today. So don't forget that.
Pie. Enjoy your pie.
and next week we'll continue on with this, and we're gonna have this recording available, but maybe, are you also gonna have the questions that we can just email out to the group?
Yep.
So
Yep.
you might want to ponder some of those questions, and then, again, look at some of the stories in the Bible to maybe bring that into discussion next week. What comes to mind about your faith stories or moments or struggles. So, and thank you all so much for sharing your personal stories and moments. That is just very dear. And as we continue to do this, I think it will be something that we'll find more comfort in doing as well. So at least I hope so for you.
Thank you for prompting that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so very much. Thank you, Pastor Peter.
Peace.
Yes.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
week.
Thanks, Penny. See ya.
Thanks. Have fun with your maple syrup.
Oh man, there's so much. I'm gonna have to do a drop off for you too.
It will not be
Especially-
turned away.
I know.